And it was for the first time that Indian economy was studied with the modern criteria. He tried to work out the per capita income. He tried to work out yields, prices, wages. He tried to work out the burden of taxation, land revenue and other things. And it is all at the death of Akbar, that is the highest point the Indian economy or Indian polity or society has reached. After that there is a decline. And over there his attempt was to show that the size of population under Akbar was very small, and with the coming of the British, the growth of population took place, more area under cultivation came, trade and commerce flourished, towns emerged, all those sort of things. The purchasing capacity has increased, prices has gone down, wages has come up. But while he started comparing 1601 with 1901 to 10, for which he has the ample data available, the British reliable data available, he realized that it is not at all better than what it was in 1601. If it is not worse, it is not even better. So he didn't really come to a conclusion. He then went over to study another, and that was from Akbar to Aurangzeb, where he tried to study trade and commerce. And he based himself totally, because he was no expert in Persian, on Dutch and English sources, because the Dutch and English companies were there, and he gave a picture as if the entire trade of India was by the two companies. The Indians were not the merchants at all, and if there was any influx of silver from Europe, it was because of the English East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, and all India's relationship with the Europe and outside world was a result of the two companies' activities, which benefited India. So, and therefore while Ashindas Gupta and others wrote, they said that it was a very Eurocentric approach. Then he wrote another better work, Agrarian System of Muslim India, which I am sure you must have read in your Delhi Sultanate period reports, discussing how the revenue was realized and all that. Monet was what one will say a more balanced imperialist historian, not really asserting his position, a little more scientific. He was the one who discovered the importance of Ain-e-Akbari's statistics for reconstructing the economy of the Mughal India in modern terms. And that gave rise, as I have said, to a nationalist school which was at two levels. One level was where the attempt was to take up issues with the British. So if Moreland wrote that the Akbar's empire, the economy of Akbar's empire and that of the British empire is comparable, Radha Kamal Mukherjee will immediately write a book, Economy of the Mughal Empire, Economy of India, 16th to 18th century, and will try to find faults with Moreland and would try to say that India was much better off under Akbar rather than it is under the British. He would say these prices were not wholesale, but retail and all that, compare that. So that was rather one way over assessing or overestimating the contribution of the Mughal Empire. Because you are faced with that and trying to say that no, our own rulers were better than the rulers, the British rulers. Another attempt which started off at that time was that to say that Indians did not fight against each other, they lived together. And the two most important examples of them were Tarachand, the Allahabadi school, influence of Islam on Indian culture. Influence of Islam on Indian Culture, a remarkable work, more in line with Al-Biruni rather than Abul Fazl or any political historian. He is trying to find out how, while two great civilizations, the Indian civilization and the so-called Islamic civilization, which was more Persian perhaps in nature, came in contact with each other, what were the results? So he tries to find out what happened to the architecture, what happened to literature, what happened to the arena of thought, how Bhakti movement and Sufism all are the result of this interaction between the two civilizations, how now not a Saracenic but an Indian architecture is emerging, medieval Indian architecture, medieval Indian music, which is neither Hindu nor Muslim at all. But of course, by that time, Rabindranath Tagore has already written an essay talking of the composite culture of India. So it is Tarachand who is writing about influence of Islam on Indian culture, how Indian culture improved, developed further with the two cultures coming together. From Aligarh School, Professor Muhammad Habib came out with another interesting work, and you will be understanding its relevance more when presently I will be coming over to Community School. He wrote a book, the Mahmoud of Ghazna, trying to say that Mahmoud of Ghazni didn't come for any religious motives. The major motives to come to India were economic or financial. He was more keen to have elephants, he was more keen to have wealth, and he was ready to plunder even the Islamic world for his own purposes. Of course, it was 1920s, late 20s, while Muslim League was running the whole battle in Aligarh. But in spite of that, Habib was able to say whatever he wished to in his very intimate manner. He finishes his work with one hikayat from Sadi's Gulistan, Sheikh Sadi's Gulistan, where it is written, and he writes, he reproduces the translation, that by an accident, Mahmud of Ghazni's grave got dug, and the whole of the body was gone, only a part of his skull was there, but the eye sockets were there, and within the sockets, the two fireballs were spinning, not rolling, but spinning. And then, as usually in that work comes out, a wise man was called to find out what's happening to Mahmud of Ghazni. He said, Mahmud is seeing where is going all the wealth he has collected from Somnath to Baghdad. He said Baghdad as well, the Islamic world. He's seeing where the wealth he has collected from Somnath to Baghdad is going. So without saying anything, he is now demolishing, because by that time the Muslim communalist historians were making Mahmud of Ghazni and Aurangzeb the heroes. Habib doesn't say anything. In his own work, he will very easily write the Sultans of Delhi patronized the dancing girls and the mullahs with equal generosity and indifference, within quote. The Sultans of Delhi patronized the mullahs and the dancing girls with equal generosity and indifference. For them, they haven't come here to spread Islam, they have come to enjoy life. So dancing girls and mullahs both were equally, they were indifferent and generous to both of them equally. Habib also wrote an introduction, but that was after 1947, so I am not discussing it over here. I would like to finish here up till 47. What happened after the independence will be taken separately, because then the Indian historians were free. They were not compelled to come out with a response to the British or the imperialist historiography, but to write with confidence. So that trend changes. So while this sort of a secular, scientific, nationalist school was developing, there was another school which was chauvinistic and communal. On the British or the imperialist historians were emphasizing on theory of separations between Hindus and Muslims, antagonism between Hindus and Muslims. But as Smith said, Akbar was better than any previous Hindu ruler. Right? Akbar was, of course, no doubt, an improvement to any other Hindu ruler of India. That is his statement. So the Muslims were very keen to pick up immediately that we are outside, and they were emphasizing Muslims were outsiders. So the Muslim communal school of historians led by Ishtiaq Hussain Qureshi, accepted this premise and agreed that yes, Indians are not Indians, there are Hindus and Muslims, and Muslims were outsiders in India, but they were superiors. Of course, there is they may be inferior to the English, British or Europeans, but they are at least superior to the Indians, Hindus. So he accepted, say historians of that ilk accepted this position, and at the same time, the Hindu communalist school also developed, which was more chauvinistic rather than communal. It was communal as well, but chauvinistic more. So there started an attempt to write shipbuilding in ancient India, Indian colonies in the Far East. I am giving you the titles of books by historians like R.C. Mujamdar and Radha Kumud Mukherjee, Radha Kamal Mukherjee's elder brother. Radha Kamal Mukherjee wrote Economy of India 16th to 18th century. Both were anti-imperialist, nationalist, but Radha Kumud Mukherjee became more chauvinistic. So was R.C. Mujamdar. So if the old ancient Greeks have their colonies, if Athens has its colonies, India also has its colonies in the Far East, as we were also imperialists, we were also colonizers, we were also having a shipbuilding industry. So all those sort of things. But at the same time, agreeing that Muslims were outsiders, they were rapacious, they were cruel. This was one strain which was going on. As against that, as we have seen, there was the nationalist school, talking in totally different terms. Then there was a more healthy school developing, which was not emphasizing on political history or cultural history, but going over to economic history. The actual debate was how the British are really destroying our economy, why there is a poverty of India, the poverty of India question, the major question. If it is the nationalist who is talking about, Dadabhai Naoroji and others, about drain of wealth, so R.C. Dutt, a British trained administrator, the only Indian ICS who became commissioner in pre-independent India under the British rule. He was commissioner of Odisha. He became one of the journal presidents of the Indian National Congress, left his position, went to London and took a lecturership at School of Oriental and African Studies. He wrote 2 books, India under the early British rule, India under the early British rule, and India in Victorian era. He emphasized that how, with the help of all figures and facts which were at his disposal in Public Records Office in London, he himself was an ICS officer, so he has access, and Public Records Office London has all the material, whatever they were receiving, custom books and everything, parliamentary papers. So all from the documents he is quoting, how much is the drain from the country, how much is the decline of the manufactures in the country, how much is the devastation to agriculture, how heavy is the burden of the land revenue. So one after the other he takes all with facts and figures coming from the British official records themselves. It is very interesting to note that in India, because of the debate, a very scholarly debate, which was not polemical but scholarly, between the imperialist historians and the nationalist historians, one of the field which developed most, field or branch of history which developed most was economic history. If you go over to entire historiography of Europe, economic history is the last to develop. Right? Because that was not the main thing for them. Here the major issue was, if there is an Indian National Congress, there is an Indian History Congress. The historians are in the realm of national movement. They are trying to study their own country's history in their own way, using the methodology of the European historians or European historiography. The canons are the same, but it is their tools and our hands and minds. And the attempt is to compare the British rule with the previous